everyone, it is the Bookatarian here for another video. Today I will be discussing my thoughts on The Will of the Empress by Tamora Pierce, which is a series of rereadings and now eventual reading for the first time of the many series that take place in the Blinding Circle world, essentially. All the Circle series. And I gotta say, I wasn't expecting this. Wasn't expecting what this book was. It took me by surprise, and usually that would be a good thing, but the way it was done in this book, it lessened my enjoyment of it just a little bit. The plot, I took issue with the plot, unfortunately, and I'm not going to get too spoilery in details about that in this part of the video, because this is spoiler-free for right now. It just, like I said, took me by surprise in not the best way. I was expecting the plot to be more evenly paced, and it was not. It took about almost halfway into the book before anything really interesting actually happened, and that kind of thing does happen, I hear, in more political intrigue-heavy books, which this definitely was. There is a lot of political intrigue in this book. It's kind of the main point of the plot at its entirety, and so I just was having a bit of a hard time with that until it actually started picking up and getting interesting halfway through the book. That being said, I did still give this book 4 out of 5 stars because I did really enjoy it. It just took me a little bit to figure out what the heck was going on here. There are details that happened to the main characters of this book that didn't happen in their books in the second quartet. There was a lot, especially with Briar, that was discussed when we were in his perspective that he has PTSD, and it's not from what happened in the second book, but it's from something else that happened that we didn't get to see. So I was like, all of this character growth is happening off screen or off page, and it makes no sense that it would mean anything because we don't know what it was. I mean, we very slowly got to learn a little bit about what it was, but for the most part, it was off the page. And so I thought that was just a little bit strange, and like I said, kind of hard to wrap my head around, but those were mostly the only things that I feel like really took away from my enjoyment of the book, was some random character development that wasn't quite up to where it usually is, and the plot just not being what I expected. So that is going to be all for the spoilery-free section. If you have not read The Will of the Empress, go away and read it, and come back and start a discussion in the comments. Tell me what you liked about it in the comments, what you didn't like. If you haven't read it yet, are you excited to? Have you read any more of Tamora Pierce's books? Just let me know in the comments down below. Really, the beginning of this book, and I remember from the brief time that I tried to read it for the first time, like a year ago, the beginning of the book was just so heavy and depressing because everyone's coming back and they're realizing that they're all so different, and they close off their mental connections with each other. But I just feel like Sandry didn't handle everything as well as she probably should have. She should have thought more about how it would affect them to learn that they can't live at Discipline Cottage anymore, that they have to strike out on their own. They are considered as adults now. And she didn't give them any warning when she found out about it. In her book, she didn't write letters or disclose this information in her letters to them. Like, of course they were going to be a little bit upset with her that she didn't give them all fair warning when she could have and should have given them a warning about this before they just came home and had this dumped on them. Like, I can understand why they're all upset with her, but 2 whole years go by with Briar, Daja, and Triss living in the same house that Daja is mostly paying for, and Briar is as well, and Triss is their glorified housekeeper, who seems to be running through other employees of the house pretty quickly because she has such high standards. I just found it odd that they all were like not even considered completely friends with each other anymore. They just kind of existed around each other for 2 years until the Duke asked them all to go with Sandry when she visits Nemours. Well, she is proud to be a noble, and she's kind of ashamed that her parents weren't exactly the best at it. Yeah, just the entire thing with Sandry needing to go and check up on her lands and visit with her cousin, the Empress of Nemours, which the infamous Empress of Namorn. Another thing I want to say, quick tangent. We still don't know who was behind the coin counterfeiting thing. We never figured that out, and I thought for sure that would have been like mentioned in this book, and it's never happened. And I'm very annoyed. I wanted to know. I wanted to know what so much of Coldfire was divulged to. It was a plot that was so prevalent in that book, and we get nothing. And so obviously we get to, I almost said Emelon. We get to Namorn, and Sandry is very much been warned by the Duke that the Empress is probably going to try and get Sandry to stay. Not just because she is a noble, a high-ranking noble of Namorn descent, and has responsibilities, but because Sandry is a very powerful mage. Granted, nobody in classic Circle series fashions know how strong and powerful all of these mage children are, and boy did I hate the Empress. I mean, I kind of assumed that I would because she, just based off of how they do regular marriages in Namorn, was always kind of an off-putting point to me. But the other half of how they do marriages that we learned about in this book, the kidnapping to force the woman to sign a marriage contract, that really threw me over the edge. I was so angry, like anytime it got mentioned or brought up, anytime it happened to Sandry, of course, because it happened twice. I was thinking that it maybe happened once, but no, 2 times in the same book. Sandry gets kidnapped by a noble to try and convince her to sign a marriage contract to him so that he can get married, and like, why? And I'm just glad when Sandry got to free her maid, I forget, Kajurni. She got to free her from her forced kidnapping to marriage. Like, oh my gosh, the story of Kajurni's assault, it was so touching, essentially, that we got to actually see an instance of that, and it didn't go well. But the victim could at least have some consolation that she is going to be free now, that somebody finally did something for her. And it's just, the Empress's whole attitude behind this, just because you got taken twice and escaped your captors both times, does not mean that you are just so freaking special that everyone should be working around your standards. The first one more especially, because she was trapped in the dark, and she's an 18-year-old and she's still terrified of the dark. Not gonna lie, that was a little bit strange. But it was still terrifying to watch because we know that Sandry is so unbelievably terrified of the dark. And she was kind of hyperventilating a little bit, maybe, and screaming. And so then, of course, with the rest of the characters, they all have their different kind of pulls to maybe staying in Namorn. With Triss, it's definitely the least effective, because she is a weather mage, and for some reason everyone assumes the only option for Triss to make money in Namorn is through battle magic and war magic. Which, okay, but Triss is very much not about that at all. She doesn't want to be killing people, and so that was probably the least effective pull that Namorn could possibly have thrown at her, thankfully, and especially after the mage that works for the Empress. She essentially pushed Triss down the stairs, and she was so close to death by the time someone found her that it was like, oh my god, I wasn't expecting someone to die in this book. And I'm like, are you really willing to like say, oh, if I can't have you, nobody can, with a child? But yeah, the whole thing with Triss was very nerve-wracking, of course. Thankfully, she was okay. I kind of probably would have been alright if she had ended up dying, though, too. It would have made for a more impactful story, I guess. But she managed to pull through in a realistic way. Thankfully, it wasn't like, oh, she was just magically better the next day. No, she did take time to heal all of her wounds, thankfully. So it kind of left a little more tension as for whether she'd be able to escape from the main part of Namorn where they were staying, when she's separate from the other 3. And for Daja, oh, Daja. It was very odd. She probably had the most reason to stay in Namorn, Daja did, because she discovers that she is a lesbian. And she gets a girlfriend. And the reason I'm laughing, I'm normally all for female-female romances. This one was rushed so badly. The fact that they're declaring their love for each other in the end. And it's been a month. It's been a month, ladies. You are not already in love with each other. That's ridiculous. That is not how love works. No. Sure, you are fascinated by this other person. You have sexual attraction to him. Sure, you like them a lot. You're pretty good friends at this point, and you're lovers. Sure. That doesn't mean you're in love with them and should be confessing your love to each other. But yeah, I did really like Rizu as a character, and the reasons for them eventually splitting up at the end made perfect sense, but their romance in general I couldn't really buy because it was so rushed. And it was very unfortunate because this is supposed to be a really big deal, and it just wasn't. It was a bit of a letdown. Briar's plot throughout the book was really interesting and weird. He's being, like, flirted with by this Empress, who's got to be at least 30. Probably even 35, maybe 40 or something. She's old! She's old compared to the rest of the cast. But she can sense that he is a total ladies' man, and Briar is. And so she's flirting with him, and obviously one of her courtiers is more seriously trying to court him, which was a little bit better than the Empress trying to court him, if I'm being honest. But she offers him to make Briar the Empire's gardener or something, Imperial gardener, something like that. And I was just like, yeah, Briar's not really that much for titles. He doesn't care about getting a title. He just wants to work his great magic, honestly. So that was effective enough to have still been a risk, but especially after what happened to Sandry being kidnapped the first time, he was like, fuck that, I'm out, bye. And I was glad that everyone kind of came to their senses after Sandry was kidnapped the first time. I was a little upset that nobody thought to go to Dasha and explain to her what happened to Sandry until the morning after the fact. Like, shouldn't Dasha have been clued in on this? Dasha, who has a mental connection open to Sandry at that point. She was the first one that Sandry reconnected with. And Sandry didn't say anything once she got freed. The Empress is like, okay, I'm done being gentle and subtle about this. We are going to seal the magical border, so they are not going to be allowed to leave. They're on the road to journey back. Right, the crazy man from Coldfire that helped Dasha evacuate all of the people of the hospital fire. He reappears in this book, and that was pretty good to see. Another really good additional character, and his story arc kind of wrapped up within this book as well, which I liked, because he has the ability to kind of see the winds in the way that Triss does as well, and because of that, he offers himself to Sandry's cousin, Lord Ambrose, or whatever Ambrose, and he's like, you know, I can be really useful to you as a assistant, and I can help keep everything kind of from getting too crazy like it has been recently. We, of course, had Chime come with us on this journey, and, I mean, Chime was okay. She was mostly just a thing to be gawked at and loved, and a source of entertainment, and probably a little more lightheartedness than I think about, but also what she did during Sandry's first rescue. That was so cute. I just loved how she seems to be so mentally aware of everything that's going on and what her people need of her to do, and that just made me, was like, oh, she really cares about all of these people. And like Triss thought, every one of her foster siblings loved Chime, because Chime just has this charm about her that makes everyone instantaneously like her, aside from Keth. I'm looking forward to the result of all of this political intrigue that happened in this book, because I'm assuming this plot with tensions between Emelon and Nemorn is going to be the main focus of this series. At least I'm hoping that it is, because it seems like the Empress is too big of a threat to not continue to get what she wants. Alright, so that is actually all of my thoughts on the Will of the Empress. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Like this video if you liked it. Hit the subscribe button down below if you want to. Hit the notification bell so you can get properly notified when I make new videos. But again, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next video soon.